In the previous videos, we saw how we could control the output XML file generated by your form by modifying either the names of the widgets in the sections or by explicitly changing the binding name in the Data Model tab. However, sometimes when you're building a form, you are not in control of the XML that needs to be generated, but rather the XML is actually specified to you as part of the contract between this form and the system that it's going to be talking to. Composer supports this style of data model binding as well. And first thing I'd like to do is give you a quick look at the XML file that our IT department has said needs to be generated by this form. Here is the XML file, and as you can see, it's very simple. It basically follows the same similar structure to the data that's in my form as you'd expect, but it can be arbitrarily complex should you need it. Very often another aspect of having things conform to the schema is where there's a standard form schema that forms the basis of every single form, and then additional fields are added in addition to that. Anyway, so that's the XML file, very straightforward. Let's see how we can import that into Avoka SmartForm Composer. On the Data Model tab, I simply click on the little icon in the toolbar of the Data Connections panel. Click to add a data connection. Add a resource. So resource is really just a file, and it's going to be added into the Composer server. I'm going to go and find that file on my computer, C drive, in my dev directory. You can obviously put this wherever you want. And there's my sample.xml file. This is a sample XML file that describes the format of the XML. And save it. The first thing that Composer does is says, would I like to update the root element name to worldwide shipping, which, if you remember, was the root element name of that XML file. Now, we could leave the root element name as my XML file, which is the default element name that we asked Composer to use, but Composer is clever enough to realize that we probably want to change this, so we'll say yes. We'll now see that sample XML is shown in the Data Connections tab, or the structure of that is shown, and you should remember this from the from looking at the XML file. That's the basic structure of sample.xml. But at the moment, the XML that will be generated, and you can see this by the icons, is shown by the names and structure of the fields. However, what we can do to override this is simply start dragging and dropping from the, instead of using the default data connection, which just uses essentially the name of the element, we can start dragging and dropping from the explicit XML that we've imported. And I'll simply drag from first name onto, oops, just expand that, from first name onto given name, and watch it change from bound relative to bound absolute. You'll also notice that first name has now disappeared from the generated XML, from the default XML, and is now bound under customer info on the imported XML. Let's do that in a few more places. There's also a different icon on the right hand side, and let's do the other two as well. So instead of send me special offers, the tag is going to be OK to contact, and instead of special offer, it's going to be called, sorry, instead of gift, it's going to be called special offer. So you may already be asking the question of yourself, what about one of the fields that doesn't have a binding, such as contact phone? At the moment, that's still bound relative to this part of the XML. And the answer is that Composer is actually able to deal with multiple XML files, the default one, as well as one or more imported XML files. And when it actually generates the underlying XML stored in this form, it will merge the definitions from both the default XML file and also any of the imported XMLs into a single consolidated XML with in this case, worldwide shipping as the root name of that XML file. So this means you can use multiple different XML files plus the default XML file. You can really mix and match and achieve exactly what you want in that underlying XML. The other alternative, of course, is I could unbind. If I wanted only the sample XML, I could simply unbind contact phone by double-clicking on it and saying not bound. I'm not going to do that in this case. Let's go and see what the generated XML looks like. In the generated XML produced when I press the submit button, as you can see, the root element is worldwide shipping. Then we have the data that we didn't absolutely bind into the sample XML file. This is the default value that's coming out of the default bindings. And then we have the two elements, or the two top level elements with all of their appropriate sub-elements for the that were explicitly bound. So all of this works nicely. The two different XML files are merged together into a single XML file with the root element as specified. And this gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility and power. Just a couple of other things to note. The first one is that Composer does not directly support XML schema files. We work off a sample XML file rather than an XML schema. If what is provided to you is an XML schema, there are a variety of tools which will generate a sample XML file for you, including tools like XML Spy, Liquid XML, and various online free and other online tools. Another point to note is that the sample.xml file that I imported is actually not stored as part of the form itself, but is actually stored at the organizational level on the resources tab within Composer. And the reason for that is that there is a strong possibility that when you're building forms, many of those forms may share the same or sections of the same XML files, and therefore those XML files are stored globally so that they can be reused across multiple forms.